Hi, first graders. Miss Jacobson here. I'm here to continue our book. It's book 11 in the My Weird School book series. Mrs. Kormel is not normal. So where we left off, remember Mrs. Kormel is our bus driver and she has her own secret language with the kids. So let's see what happens. We're on chapter 3 called My Head Almost Exploded. And I will do my best, as I did last time, to show you pictures when they come up. Remember, some pages just have words and you'll have to use your imagination, and some have pictures. My head almost exploded. Bingo boo, limpus cadoodle, said Mrs. Kormel. Andrea's equally annoying crybaby friend Emily got on the bus in front of her house. She sat down next to Andrea and they studied Andrea's dumb flashcards together. Is everybody here? Asked Mrs. Kormel after she picked up a few more kids. Yes, we all said. If you're not here, raise your hand. I knew that was a trick question because if somebody wasn't there, we wouldn't be able to see if their hand was up. But just to be on the safe side, I got up in my seat to see if anybody who wasn't there had their hand up. How silly. Limpus cadoodle, AJ, said Mrs. Kormel. In case you don't remember, that means sit down. Mrs. Kormel doesn't like it when we get out of our seats. No standing on the seats, said Mrs. Kormel. Here's a picture. Can I kneel on my seat? I asked. You can only kneel if your name is Neil. Anyone named Neil may kneel. Can I stand if my name is Stan? I asked. Okay, said Mrs. Kormel. If your name is Stan, you can stand. I can't stand sitting down, Michael said. Nobody can stand sitting down, Ryan said. If you're sitting down, you're not standing. Can you crouch if your name is Crouch? I asked. There's nobody named Crouch, Andrea told me. She thinks she knows everything. Oh, yeah, I said. What about that guy on Sesame Street named Oscar the Crouch? That's Oscar the Grouch, dumbhead, Andrea said. I knew that. Now that we're all here, how about singing a song to make the ride go quicker, suggested Mrs. Kormel. Let's sing The Wheels on the Bus, said Andrea. I love that song. The girls started singing the Wheels on the Bus, and the boys started singing another song, and soon it got really, really loud. Soon everybody on the bus was screaming, and the kids were bouncing around. I covered my ears so my head wouldn't explode. Something about being on a bus makes you want to go crazy. Maybe it's all that yellow. I bet Mrs. Kormel was sorry she told us to sing. Suddenly, she blew her whistle really loud. Zinky zip, she yelled. There's a picture. That's her way of saying quiet down in her secret language. Everybody stopped singing. Shh, my cell phone is ringing, said Mrs. Kormel. It's Mr. Klutz. Mr. Klutz is our principal. He's like the king of the school. He's bald, too. One time he kissed a pig. This other time he got stuck on the top of a flagpole. Another time he was climbing the school and the custodian had to rescue him by sticking one of those toilet plungers on his head. We saw it live and in person. Mr. Klutz is nuts. What does Mr. Klutz want? Somebody yelled. Mrs. Kormel finished talking to Mr. Klutz and turned around to whisper something to the boys in the row behind her. They turned around and whispered something to the girl in the row behind them. Then she turned around and whispered something to the girl in the row across from her, who turned around and whispered something to Michael. We have to go pick up a nude kid, Michael whispered. A nude kid? That's disgusting. That nude kid better not sit next to me. Tell that nude kid to put some clothes on, said Michael. Let's see what happens. Chapter 4. Are we there yet? We hadn't even met him yet, but suddenly everybody on the bus was buzzing about the nude kid. Some people don't believe in wearing clothes, said Andrea, who thinks she knows everything. They're called nudists. I call them freaks, said Ryan. My parents say we should all respect and celebrate people's differences, said Emily. What's the big deal? Andrea asked. After all, we were born without clothing. You were born without a brain, I couldn't resist adding. Anytime anyone says anything about being born, always say they were born without a brain. That is the first rule about being a kid. I'm nude under my clothes, Ryan told us. Thanks for sharing that with us, I told him. Now I'm totally grossed out. Andrea said that nudists save a lot of money because they don't have to buy clothes. Michael said that nudists have to spend a lot of money because they always have to buy sunscreen. But Emily said that nudists save a lot of money because they don't have to do laundry. But then Ryan said that nudists have to spend a lot of money to heat their houses because they're so cold. Here's a picture. They make good points. Let's see what happens. The nude kid probably doesn't even have a closet at home, I said, because he doesn't put any clothes in it. Do you think that nude kids are allowed to wear hats? Asked Michael. Thinky zip, yelled Mrs. Kormel. Mrs. Kormel had pulled out a big map and she had opened it up to the top of the steering wheel. She told us we had to be quiet while she figured out the directions. I bet it's hard to drive and look at a map at the same time. To make things even worse, it started raining. Mrs. Kormel put the windshield wipers on. All the girls started singing. The wipers on the bus go swish, 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 swish. Zinky zip, yelled Mrs. Kormel. I can't concentrate. We drove for a long time in the rain. It was hard to go so long without talking. Are we there yet? Somebody said. No, said Mrs. Kormel. Here's the picture. Are we lost? Emily asked. Of course not, said Mrs. Kormel. I just don't know where we are. Oh no, we're going to miss show and share, Andrea said to Emily like she was all worried. After I spent all weekend making my flashcards. Ha ha ha. I spent all weekend playing football. Nan and a boo boo on her. We were going to be late for school, and it was great. I hoped Mrs. Kormel would find the right way to get to the new. I hoped Mrs. Kormel wouldn't find the right way to get to the nude kid's house for a while, because right after show and share, we have math. Chapter 5. We'll read one more. The middle of nowhere. Mrs. Kormel drove for 1,000,000 hours and we still hadn't reached the new kid's house. Where was it? Now show and share was over for sure. We probably missed math too. If we didn't get to school soon, we would miss our dear time. That stands for drop everything and read. I hate reading. Finally, we drove by some big trucks and there was a sign that said detour. Hey, we're going to take a tour, said Ryan. Tours are cool. Detours aren't tours, dumbhead, said Andrea. Workers are fixing the road, so Mrs. Kormel has to get off this road and go another way around to the new kid's house. Fix Latinger, said Mrs. Kormel as she slammed her fist against the steering wheel. I don't know what Bix Latinger means, but that's what Mrs. Kormel always says when she gets really angry or frustrated. What does Bix Latinger mean, Mrs. Kormel? I asked. Never you mind, said Mrs. Kormel. I think Mrs. Kormel must have said a bad word, said Ryan. But it's in her secret language, said Michael, so we won't know what it means. You shouldn't say any bad words. We all tried to figure out which bad word Mrs. Kormel had said. Here's the picture. The detour. You might have seen detour signs when you or your parents are up and in cars and the workers are fixing the road and you have to go around. So they were trying to figure out the bad words. Michael and Ron knew a few that I didn't know, and they were always trying to teach them to me. So even though we were really late for school, it was still a learning experience. After we got off the regular road, the road we were on wasn't even a real road. It was more like a jungle or a swamp or something. There were these big plants slapping against the bus windows. The ride was bumpy and it was still raining. Mrs. Kormel could hardly see in front of her. This is like the rainforest, Andrea said. I hope we don't get eaten by alligators, said Michael. Look, somebody yelled. A family of ducks was crossing the road in front of us. Here we go. So cute. They're cute. Let's run them over. I guess they had differing opinions about that one. I didn't really want Mrs. Kormel to run over the ducks, but it was pretty hilarious anyway. Mrs. Kormel kept on driving, but I didn't see the nude kid's house anywhere. In fact, I didn't see any houses or human beings. Where are we? Somebody asked. The middle of nowhere, said Mrs. Kormel. It was too bad we weren't at the edge of nowhere, because if we were at the edge of nowhere, we'd be right next to the edge of somewhere. And the edge of somewhere is near the middle of somewhere, and that is where we want to be. Ryan said we were probably close to the nude kid's house, because if you were nude, you'd probably live in the middle of nowhere. That way, nobody would see you. And that's where we were. It made sense to me. Andrea looked at her watch and got all upset. We missed dear time, she complained. We're very late for school now. Ha ha ha, this was the greatest day of my life. Don't you worry, Andrea, said Mrs. Kormel. I'll get you to school if it's the last thing I do. Just then, I had a genius thought. Right after dear time is spelling. I hate spelling. And if we missed dear time, and we weren't even at the nude kids' house yet, there was a good chance we were going to miss spelling too. And that meant we would miss the big spelling test, which I didn't study for. I decided the new kid was the coolest kid in the history of the world. Thanks to him, we were going to miss the big spelling test. Big Splottinger, said Mrs. Kormel. Ooh, we all said. Mrs. Kormel said that bad word again. And chapter 6 is the nude kid dad. I'll give you a little preview and then we'll save it for next time. Finally, Mrs. Kormel stopped the bus in front of the house and pushed the button to make the magic stop sign come out. We will pause there. We'll see what happens. Thanks for listening.